and welcome to our podcast on the world of systemic and family therapy featuring the therapists. In an era of prolific podcasting, there are so many amazing therapists offering important and valuable thoughts and insights into the world of mental health, including many amazing systemic and family therapists. Yet, as two licensed therapists and educators of therapists in training, what often fascinates us most is not those thoughts and insights, but the people themselves, those who have chosen to become systemic and family therapists, whose personal stories have driven them to sit with, hold space for, and be in relationship with others who are struggling and going through hardships. This podcast aims to explore and interview a variety of family therapists in different spaces and places in their personal journeys and careers as family therapists, to highlight their humanity, their passions, their motivations to be helpers and healers. And in true experiential and systemic foundational principles, we hope to do this with a little bit of joy, humor, and laughter. So thank you for being with us. As this is our first episode, we thought we would just talk to you all and introduce ourselves a little bit as the co-host for this series. I'm Dr. Tabitha Webster.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gita Seshadri.
And we are the co-hosts. So we're going to start, hopefully, all of our interviews with folks with a little bit of fun. And so, Dr. Seshadri, I'm going to start this with you.
Sounds good.
Okay. What's your favorite food?
Anything gluten-free.
If you could only wear one color for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Black. It goes with everything.
What song best describes you?
Oh, Rain Check?
Rain Check. Are you passing?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, what song is that? I don't know that song.
I'm sure if there hasn't been a song called Rain Check, now there will be. You know what? That kind of actually describes me. Because in college, there was this phrase that I used to use all the time, and I even use it in my law and ethics class. A derivation of it is not necessarily. And the phrase that I use in law and ethics is, it depends. So actually, Rain Check, if it was a song, is actually very fitting.
We're going to have to come back to this. We're going to have to go Google and see some Rain Check songs. It's got to be out there. If you were an animal, what animal are you?
I think I would have to say a dolphin. They love the water, they are very smart, and their voice sometimes sounds squeaky.
What is your favorite place that you have ever gotten to visit?
I have to pick one. I had the blessing and grateful opportunity to travel internationally, and I've been to different places in Europe as well as Asia. I'm just gonna sort of say it depends in the sense of international places. It's one thing to be outside of your space and having to acclimate and really be a chameleon, so to speak.
Do any of those trips like really stand out?
You know, each of them were unique in their own ways. The three places that top are England, Turkey, and India. And then a close second would be France. Now I'm thinking of all the other places that I've listed. So you can see how hard it is for me to choose a one favorite. Shall I ask you the questions too?
Sure.
Okay. What's your favorite food?
I know these questions. I wasn't ready for it.
That's good. That's why it's rapid fire. Keep you on your toes.
I mean, what came to my head immediately, and this is a running joke between us, but it's cheesecake. I love a good cheesecake, so we'll go with cheesecake right now.
Sounds good. I'm actually craving one right now. All right. What is your favorite place you've ever got to visit?
So my top three, I would say, and I have gotten to do a little bit of international travel, but not as much as I've hoped to. Hawaii is probably my most favorite place. It's just an incredible, stunning island, and people and culture and food and just a little bit of everything. It's just wonderful. Internationally, Tokyo, Japan last year was just a really incredible experience, and culturally enriching and family oriented, and just a lovely.
If you could wear only one color for the rest of your life, what would it be?
This is a hard one. As you know, I love all color and I love mixing colors. So picking one and just sticking with it would be very challenging. But I'd probably go blue. Like if it could only really be one, it would probably be blue.
Nice. That's my favorite color. What song best describes you?
So the one that came to mind immediately, probably because I've been listening to it a lot right now, it's called Live More, Love More by Kat Burns. Speaks to living life to the fullest and letting go of unimportant things and focusing on the things that are really important.
What's the melody like? Is it like a slow song?
A little bit slow, a little bit folksy kind of vibe, but it's not a slow tempo. Like, it is an upbeat song in itself. I wouldn't call it a pop song or a rock song kind of in that way, but it is an up tempo song.
All right, last but not least, what animal are you and why?
Well, I want to, I guess, give a little history on this question too, and then I'll answer it. So I was asked this question in my master's interview to attend my master's program for family therapy. And I loved it ever since that moment. And then I brought it into our interviewing process at all the universities that I've been at and got to interview students for. When I first got that question in my master's program, I said I was a hummingbird. A lot to do with the the color and the vibrancy, but also my now known ADHD-ness that I didn't know at the time, and just sort of fluttering around to all the flowers that I was interested in. When I graduated, my advisor said he no longer thought I was a hummingbird, but that I was much more an owl. I had slowed down a lot and occupied a more owl-like presence, I guess. And I do love owls. They're incredible animals as well, but it didn't quite speak to me in the same way. And so now I say I'm a flamingo. And again, the color. I've always been a bird. That has always resonated. And I do love pink, and there's a lot of cool things about flamingos. But mama flamingos, they actually lose their color when they feed their babies. They literally give completely of themselves to their little ones that they support, and actually drains their own color. And that really resonates with me. We also want to formally introduce ourselves after kind of giving a little bit of fun version. As I said, I'm Dr. Tabitha Webster, and I am a proud neurodivergent human. I am an associate faculty, core faculty here at Alliant International University. I am currently a co-branch director for the online CFT master's program, and I also get the great honor of teaching at the Sacramento campus as well as our online campus. I am a Alliant MFT approved supervisor, and I've been doing supervision work for quite a while now. My clinical and research interests have always been trauma. I kind of call it the hub of trauma, because for me, there's so many spokes that come off at that center wheel of interest of trauma. These kind of include neurobiology, neurodiversity, developmental trauma, childhood abuse and neglect, chronic pain, marginalized and oppressed communities and families, within that multicultural, multiracial family dynamics, effective suicide prevention, and then a lot of public policy. Professional public policy is really important to me too. Those are kind of my spaces of interest. I really try to be an affirming therapist. I'm grounded in experiential therapy, and I really integrate interpersonal neurobiology. My background's in neuroscience, and so that really speaks to me. And I really love working with, big dynamic family systems. I'm truly a family therapist in that way. Give me as many people in a room as you can. And I love working with kiddos and use of all agents, and the neurodivergent community is my community. And so those are kind of the spaces formally to introduce myself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Gita Seshadri. I have been at Alliant for the last 13 years. Wow, time flies. I am at the Sacramento campus. I also teach for the online campus as well. A lot of my course topics, similarly with Dr. Webster, would be trauma. I've said there's over 120 types of trauma. So I'm very comfortable helping clients and students in terms of thinking about traumatic experience. I'm going to share about my clinical experiences in a moment. I do teach that class, as well as have taught parent-child before, have also taught law and ethics. I'm actually teaching that now in a variety of different capacities. Practicum, I teach some of the doctoral classes, qualitative research, because that's my jam. It's very process oriented. I haven't taught it here, but I have taught versions of the sex therapy course as well as the psychopathology course. In terms of my research interests, I'm very much into interracial couples and families, as well as their intercultural elements and interfaith elements. Recently, I wrote a book with Dr. Dumashi Gutierrez expanding my work for my dissertation on strengths of interracial couples. And the book is about helping these families across the life cycle. Other areas of interest research-wise include cultural intersectionality and diversity, as well as process-based research. I've also done a little bit of publishing around the grief experience, as well as substance misuse and recovery. Clinically, I am all across the board. Earlier in my career, I was helping families reunify through Child Protective Services. So I'd work with parents and helping them get their kids back, as well as working with those who are struggling with substance misuse and addiction. As my career has evolved, I've worked with adults and couples around betrayals, infidelity, working with college students and their college experience, especially during the pandemic, because that created a lot of havoc and change, as well as working with folks around their experiences as entrepreneurs and those that are self-employed, trauma, like I was saying before, and chronic illness. Also, I work with a lot of folks around their relationship with food, body image, self-esteem, as well as work with LGBTQ folk around their experiences and family support as well.
In family therapy, we have a tradition of socially locating ourselves as part of what we do often at conferences and when we are sort of owning our spaces. And so are there social locations, social positioning that you want to share with our audience that are important and meaningful to you?
Absolutely. So I identify as a South Asian American female. I also wanted to add this as part of research interests and clinical experiences, working a lot with my community and aspects of transitioning through the immigration experience, as well as adjusting and acculturating, and what it's like to be professional women in academia.
For me, as I mentioned kind of in my intro, I am a proud neurodivergent human. It's a really important piece of my identity and how I show up in spaces. I also have a lot of physical chronic ailments and limitations because of that don't always show up, right? There's a lot of invisible disability that I occupy as part of my identity. But, on the forefront, I am a white, highly educated human as well, and that brings a lot of positions of privilege and power. I have those kind of invisible spaces as well. Being a female in higher education and academia comes with its own unique pieces. But I'm also part of a multicultural, multiracial partnership and have been for most of my adult life, being married to my high school sweetheart. That is a really incredible part of who I am and who I exist to be, because I've never been an adult without my partner. And so it's a very important part of my identity as well.
Now that we are moving into more of the heart of what we are talking about today, how did you find your way to family therapy, and what made you get into family therapy?
Of course, you're making me go first. I see how you did that.
The tables have turned.
The tables have turned. I think for a lot of us, it came out of trying to explore my own family dynamics and what I grew up in. But my interest and love has always been neuroscience. And I think trying to understand my people, my family from that kind of space is where it really all started. Came from a very complex family dynamic and system with a lot of instability, a lot of mental health concerns, some pretty high level domestic violence and physical violence as part of that family system. A lot of trauma, just sort of childhood trauma. I always say the easiest way to explain it without getting into too much details is I can check mark the 10 out of 10 ACEs, which are the adverse childhood experiences that we use. And so coming from that environment and complex family dynamic, right, there is always a piece of me trying to figure out why, and to understand my people from that space. A lot of transgenerational trauma. As I got older, I could start to see and understand how trauma gets carried down through the generations. But in high school, I had a really invested teacher who gave me the advice to not go into psychology because I'd always be trying to fix the world. And so when I went to college, I really trusted this teacher. I didn't go into psychology. I went to bio pre-med, as a lot of people do, I think, in undergrad. And through sort of the biology side, really found kind of this integrative space of neuroscience that kind of got to psychology, but also was very biologically oriented. And so my undergrad was in neuroscience. But even while I was kind of doing that, I volunteered for, it was called Kids Court. It was at the district attorney's office. I worked with kiddos that were going to go testify against their abusers in court. And they were quite young, a lot of them. We'd take them in before these cases were going to happen and try to get them as comfortable as we could with the space, let them sit in the judge's chair, bang the gavel, ask them some, easy questions. It really oriented to what this process was going to be like for them. And that really started me down a path of working with childhood sexual abuse survivors. And so even in sort of my neuroscience space, that's really where was looking at the effects of childhood trauma on the brain and what it does to the brain. And after I graduated from undergrad, I ended up working for the Kemp Center for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect in Denver, Colorado, on a project called Fostering Healthy Futures. I was working with kiddos that had been in foster and kinship care, a really beautiful, elegant research study on sort of mentorship and support amongst kiddos that had gone through a lot of trauma and experiences and had been placed in other environments. From there, ended up getting into a neuroscience PhD program. About a year and a half in, after working with, having a rat lab of 210 rats and doing heart dissections and taking classes on sheep reproduction because I was in a reproductive endocrinology lab, decided that was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, was have a rat lab. I really got into this for people. And so, at a relatively young age, stepped away from, the thing that I had been pursuing for a really long time and left that grad program. At that point, I wasn't sure what the next step was going to be because that was what I'd always been working towards, and ended up getting a job in a residential treatment youth center, working again with kiddos that essentially was a state-funded residential center for youth that couldn't find any other placements. It was sort of the last resort for a lot of these kiddos to have a place. In the midst of that, working with these kids in this environment and then, having them maybe go back to their home environments, then coming back and seeing how they affected the family. Well, I was also doing this research project, volunteering, where we got trained in functional family therapy. It was part of this research project, and it was my first sort of introduction to family therapy. Dr. James Alexander, who pioneered functional family therapy, gave this 3-day sort of training and workshop to our research group. And at the time, while I was seeing in the residential treatment center and this training, sort of bright light of this interplay of family dynamics and systems theory, and watching these kiddos that had gone through so much trauma themselves and what that looked like, it really all came together. And so that's when I applied again for a different degree in family therapy.
Do you want to talk about how you transitioned to academia?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if it feels like a transition, if I'm honest, because even at the neuroscience place, the goal was to be in academia and to teach. I think both my high school teacher that I spoke about, my undergrad mentors, had these just amazing female academics in my life, especially in college. I had a lot of my own mental health struggles, and they were amazing support people and amazing adults that I needed to grow and develop. And so there's always been a calling for me to be able to be in that same space and hopefully provide a little bit and sort of pay it forward to help support people who have often gone through their own hardships to get where we are in mental health and family therapy, and to pay their kindness and support and guidance forward to other people that may need that and that I can provide.
What was your journey in discovering your specialties and niche?
It's just always been there, trying to just understand what happened in my own life and my own story, my own family, but then just being in all these spaces, working with and supporting people that also have been through their own traumas, especially childhood traumas.
I think we who come to this field are always gravitating towards figuring out our own story and figuring out how we interact with the world. So yeah, I resonate with that as well.
I'm wondering, just kind of in the same vein, like, how did you find your way to family therapy?
I feel like my journey was short in that I kind of wanted to be in the field of mental health and psychology from the age of 12. I will give a teaser a little bit and say that it was because I've always been an old soul in my feeling. And I think that may come naturally with those that are parentified for whatever reason. I think a big part of my experience has always been learning to be a chameleon. Being a South Asian American, I've always had to jump between two cultures constantly and really figure out, okay, well, who's an authority, who's not an authority. For those of you who don't know, South Asian culture is very patriarchal. And so being a female in that dynamic, we learn what's okay and what's not okay. I will add to this that I grew up as pretty much the only Indian kid in school because my family moved to be in an area of California. I'm a California girl at heart, actually, as well as South Asian. Did a loop around the state, but more on that later. We were pretty much one of the token Indian families that were there before the tech boom. For those of you that are trying to place that in terms of a timeline, that's in the 90s. And so I really learned where to hide myself and where to blend in and where to show up. It's only been more recently in my career that I've sort of explored what that South Asian cultural experience has meant for me because I didn't even think to consider it previously. And that was my own journey. I actually did a book chapter on intersectionality and really explored how the different aspects of myself in terms of gender and sexual orientation and education and even ability have impacted my life. When I was in college, I was applying to psychology programs, and a lot of the psychology programs for graduate school were math related. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. However, I wanted to work with people. And so insert family therapy, and it opened up a whole new world for me. After I was finishing my master's, a natural step, because I grew up in a science-oriented family, was research. And so I was like, how do I really want to incorporate research? And I found a home in family therapy in the sense of really understanding myself and figuring out my world and how maybe culture impacted that among many, many other things and experiences. One thing I will say about Indian culture or South Asian culture, not that other cultures don't do this, but we want to always put our best foot forward. And so there can be a ton of shame around admitting when you did something wrong. And so how does that figure in with having a certain perception, being pleasing, being parentified, and also being human? I've had to figure that out and continually figure that out. But that is also the beauty of this field too, is making space when space doesn't seem to be there. Going along with that, it was a journey in terms of really deciding, okay, well, I want to help people, but how am I part of this package too? And then moving on to academia, I actually was in the field clinically for a number of years before I decided to become a professor. And I actually didn't really see myself as a professor. I gravitated to academia because I really appreciated the ability to diversify and do multiple things. But even now, it's still hard for me to accept the privilege and the authority that comes with being with all the titles, if you will, and sort of seeing myself in more of the background role. What also contributed to it, I will say, is I identify as youthful. Let's call it that for now. A lot of times, even when I was calling clients early in my career, when I was a baby therapist, they're like, how old are you? I was like, well, why do you ask? And they're like, well, you sound like you're 16. Well, clearly as a therapist and educationally, I wouldn't have been 16, but that also, along with my intersections, made me think, what is this really about? And so I think that's the questions that we really need to ask ourselves is what is this really about? And then finishing the end of the story with academia, when I was doing my clinical work teaching part-time, and then I decided to do the reverse. And I think it's a little bit of a different shift and I love it. But also at the same time, it's a different way for me to think about it in terms of participating in different spaces, as well as really seeing my passion for this field take shape. The takeaway message to students and possible future students, I think mine would be, don't be afraid to take a chance.
I say this a lot. I actually just said it in class this week, but I think a lot of us that get pulled to advanced degrees, and especially in family therapy, that are trying to figure ourselves out and in our family dynamics and where we came from. And I think academia breeds this a bit, is fight the perfectionism. Like, good therapists don't necessarily always get straight A's. Like, there's a lot about what I call the artistry of sitting with clients and families that isn't about how well you can write papers and those sorts of things. Sometimes professors hate when I say these kind of things, but perfectionism is a defense mechanism that, is there to hide our insecurities. And so in your idea of taking a chance, showing up authentically, congruently, that you are enough as you are to be in these spaces and to help people and to heal with people. And so sometimes that really takes fighting those defense mechanisms that we develop along the way.
So what's your secret sauce for family therapy?
Family therapy is a really active process. And as an experiential therapist, very much specifically, is really leaning into that authenticity, that congruency, that living unmasked and being an active disruptor in the system that we're sitting with. I think it's sort of this balance of authentic, congruent relationship in a space of direct disruption is really where I find the magic of family therapy. What about you? What's your secret sauce?
Similarly, I was going to say it's all about the process. Detail-oriented, going deep, I think, is the way to go. Don't get me wrong. There are times in graduate school when I heard that phrase of it's a process, I groaned loudly, but also it makes so much sense in that we have to get in the details.
Thank you for everyone listening to our first episode of this podcast and where it's going to go. Hopefully it will give you some insight into us as co-hosts as we move through this series together and talk to and explore with other really amazing family therapists and their journeys. Toodaloo, I guess.
I'll just add thanks everybody for listening and continue to tune in.